Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good morning. We're going to have a phenomenal broadcast this morning. We have two candidates that ran alongside me in this race to the United States Senate. We have Mr. Al Bartell joining us. We have Mr. Brian Slowinski joining us. I am super excited. Let me see where my trusty co-hosts are this morning. Let's see. Robbie's here. David's here. Robbie, David. Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Tamara. Good morning, Robbie.
Good morning. David, you look nice. We dressed up for the candidates, didn't we, David? Hey, Robbie.
It's my new look.
You're muted, girl. You're muted. She's muted.
Apologies. I'm sorry. David moment. I'm sharing the
Having a David moment.
Mwah, there you go. You only joke with people you like. Oh, David's not laughing. That's not good. I'm sharing the broadcast.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is going to be a phenomenal broadcast this morning. We have Mr. Al Bartell joining us, David. We have Mr. Brian Slowinski joining us, candidates that ran alongside me in this race to the United States Senate. I was excited about this race from the very beginning. With 21 candidates, people like, what, so many candidates. I thought this was the best race ever. He had something to choose from. Everybody had somebody to choose in this race.
I completely see why, that's your viewpoint. I'm excited about hearing from Mr. Bartell because there's two schools of thought on that. Some people are like, well, so many votes get divided and what happens and who wins. You ultimately showed up, actually I think I sent you the screenshot in the top 10 with a 2.2, over 100,000, which is really impressive without being with an affiliated party.
Well, I actually was number 6. The top 3 had millions. Then there was Deborah Jackson, and we'll talk about her and when we bring her on. And then there was Mr. Lieberman, who had 1 million plus, and then there was me. So I feel very accomplished. Running as a no-name candidate, no damn money, but every dollar counted. We made it all work, and it worked the way it was supposed to. And we have a lot of feedback. I have opinions, and I can't wait to bring Mr. Bartell on. David, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay, hanging in there like a loose tooth. I think there are issues that we really need to talk about the runoff. I'm really of two minds, but about whether I support Ossoff and Warnock. I'm torn in two different directions because of the arguments that you've made about them not presenting a black agenda.
Absolutely. You better talk black to us in 2020. You better talk black to us. And if you don't, that you will pay for that. You will pay for that.
Well, we'll all pay for that.
And the other, Robbie, we will all pay for it. I think you're right about that.
We're going to dive in, David. We're going to dive in, but Robbie going to do a rapid round. Robbie, let's do a rapid round. And you want me to explain what that is before you dive in?
Please, for us non-politicals.
So this rapid round, right, I'm telling you, I hated this on the campaign trail because I don't think that fast. I'm very, I'm analytical, I'm methodical. Like I think things through before I say them. I don't just come off the top of my head. So every time we had to do this, I just kind of like probably crashed and burned. But this time I'm gonna make it a whole lot of fun. Robbie's gonna give me the name of all the candidates, all 21 candidates. You don't have to call my name, Robbie, but the names of all the candidates. And I'm gonna give you one word to describe every candidate. And then we're gonna do the same. I'm gonna do the same with Mr. Bartell, and we'll go through the list. So Robbie, you should have that list in front of you.
I have it. Thank you for resending it to me. So yes. Ed, let's go. Ed Tarver.
Ed Tarver to me was reserved.
Okay. Apparently he was from Augusta and he ran as a Democrat. Raphael Warnock ran as a Democrat, registered in Decatur.
Establishment.
Richard Dean Winfield, Democrat, has an Athens address.
Funny.
Brian Slowinski, Libertarian, White Plains, Georgia.
Slowinski. That's my word. What's his last name? Slowinski. And I'll tell you about that later.
Al Bartell, Independent, Atlanta address.
Grumpy.
Okay. Alan Buckley, Independent, Atlanta.
Who?
Michael Todd Green, Independent, Mableton.
Green.
Valencia Stovall, Independent, Ellenwood.
Nice.
John Green Fortune, Green Party out of Athens.
You called his name. Green. That was my word for him.
I'm sorry, is he on here twice? Rod Mack, he was a write-in, and there's no address for him at all. In fact, he has a 423 number, wherever that is.
Who?
Oh, Lord. You're going to get some messages about this.
Oh, sure.
Doug Collins, Republican from Gainesville. Shocker.
Irate.
Derek E. Grayson, Republican, Lithonia.
Republican.
Annette Davis Jackson, Republican, Lilburn.
Confused.
A. Wayne Johnson, Republican, Macon.
Who?
Kelly Loeffler, Republican, Atlanta.
Oblivious.
Kansas Taylor, Republican, Baxley, Georgia.
Fiery.
Deborah Jackson, Democrat, Lithonia.
Reserved.
Jamesia James, Democrat, no information on file.
Who?
Matt Lieberman, Democrat, out of Atlanta.
Cool.
Joy Felicia Slade, Democrat, no information on file at all.
Who?
Yes, that explains why there's no information. Out of those 21 candidates, obviously 10, were significant enough to make the numbers, and you were in the numbers in the 10 without any establishment money, which goes to your credit, your name, unbossed and unbought. Oh, there's Mr. Bartell.
Good morning, Mr. Bartell. Welcome to our broadcast. Good morning.
Well, hello, sports fans. How's it going?
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Bartell. It was such a pleasure to run alongside you on this campaign to the United States Senate.
He doesn't seem grumpy.
Well, the backstory is somebody said to me that was their impression of you. And I said, there's another side to him. And I look forward to, that's why I couldn't wait to have you on, because you're not grumpy.
That was somebody who disagreed with what I said.
So what did you say that that was hearsay about you? What did you say that upset so many people?
That they have to come off the sidelines and get on the court. Many people thought they were on the court, and I challenged them about being on the sidelines. To just sit back and let Washington, D.C. stakeholders come in here and hijack our campaign, hijack our races, and hijack our political future was unconscionable for us to sit back and do that. And so that was one of those people who probably did that. She said, "Hey, grumpy old man don't know what he's talking about. Get off stage."
What? So it sounds like somebody was trying to say you were salty, but could you, for lay people like me, what do you mean DC came in and hijacked? What does that mean exactly? How does the race get hijacked? How does DC come in and take over?
Sure. There's 3 reference points for a political race. Resources mean money, staff, people, and then the second one is stakeholders who are willing to contribute to the message. And then the third one is the media. So the stakeholders out of Washington, D.C., Democratic Party and Republican Party, and U.S. senatorial committees bought up the media when nobody else could purchase any, and the media was complicit. They wouldn't sell media to anybody else. The second thing they did was
Hell, we couldn't afford it, Al Bartell. If they would sell it to us, we couldn't afford
we
it.
couldn't afford it. It was too high. They put the prices so high that we couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by we wouldn't sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then
you
this,
think hijack is like a monopoly to some degree, where there's really not a competition, but the illusion of.
that's correct. No competition. And then they pick their own candidates and force the other candidates to get out of the race boldly.
How is that done? How, like, because I think a lot of people would be shocked that the Democratic Party allegedly is engaging in such activities that would be characterized as a monopoly. So
it wasn't allegedly. They actually asked people to get out of the race. The Democratic Party asked Democratic and Republican candidates to get out of the race. And the ones that refused, they smeared them, talked about them in bad ways, and was doggedly determined to make sure that nobody was in the race except their handpicked person.
And so you're an independent. How are you privy to this info?
Because the Democratic candidates were talking about it, and other people in the communities were talking about it. So it wasn't any secret.
In the streets.
Yeah, in the street. Yeah, it wasn't a secret at all.
In these political streets, Robbie, we hear it all.
Wow. I have to say it's fascinating for me being a layperson. I don't know, David is not. He's very politically savvy, etc. But I live in Atlanta, and I've really become disenchanted with the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat. Under Mayor Reed and under our current administration, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who I respect, I have watched people in my community in Atlanta proper suffer needlessly for decades, even though there's so much funding. And I've seen opportunities lost and lost and lost. So this is really interesting to me. So I mean, I know that elections are a form of an industry, and that the Democratic Party is in essence, just like the Republican Party, an industry, and that elections are an industry that keep a lot of money and jobs and consultants, et cetera. I think this presidential election had a ridiculous price tag on it in the billions. When you contemplate how much the election cost, instead of actually putting that money into helping people directly, it is kind of like, do I want any part of this? But what are the consequences of these actions? So what do you think if someone like you or Tamara, because you seem to be in a similar situation as independents, if you would have been elected, what would have been addressed if these actions had not occurred by the Democratic Party, not getting people out of the way, not maligning people if they didn't get out of the way, to force feed, as you said, specific candidates, controlling media? What would have been accomplished under you or Tamara that will not be accomplished under Loeffler or Warnock, our two current options?
Well, the message that Tamara communicated was that we have to have small business leaders at the table. They can't be ignored. And what I commented was to have neighborhood leaders, community leaders, faith leaders, and small business leaders in the decision-making process of government to the same degree as lobbyists, special interest groups, and corporations. So if Tamara had gotten elected in the first round on November 3rd as a United States Senator, then I would have been knocking on her door saying, what can I do to help you sustain the message? And then the same thing would have happened if I had gotten elected. But the
the difference, stay there with that thought. The difference is, Mr. Bartell, you wouldn't have had to knock on my door because I would have knocked on yours. And that's not what's happening right now. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. I just had to say that. You wouldn't have had to come to me. I would have come to you. But go ahead, Mr. Bartell.
Well, the point you make is that's not what's happening right now because the whole process got hijacked and they're not going to come to us. And so what we've got to do now is mobilize culture. We cannot mobilize the industry because the industry has been hijacked, but we can mobilize culture. Like what you were talking about on the Reid administration and so forth. We now, Robin, can mobilize culture.
And what do you mean by mobilized cult? I mean, can you expand a little bit on that? This resonates with me greatly because I had to, and I've said it on this show, I had to drag myself to vote. And I see these people celebrating, unfortunately, I see a lot of neoliberals who are actually very cruel to my less income producing residents with all
Yeah.
these progressive signs like Biden. So I'm like, well, gosh, what does this really mean? That's really depressing. And I'm wondering what everybody's celebrating or even fighting over when it seems like a very polluted system. Like, what are we really celebrating?
They're
We're happy.
they're celebrating being stakeholders of an industry of manipulation and domination. But to your question, what would that mean of another alternative, and how would that look? When I say mobilizing culture, take Tamara for example. She spent the heart and soul of her existence making sure that small businesses had a seat at the table, entrepreneurs had a seat at the table. That's a culture. It's not a recognized industry by the major players yet, but it will be.
Okay. Do you think that there are components? Some people would argue, and I'm one of these people, but do you think there are components like when you say cultures, do you mean feelings are incorporated? I'm wondering, I think what people are celebrating is a internal struggle. They, especially kind of a component of white America, and I hate to group, any people all together, but they have had an interesting, experience altogether, and therefore there's certain characteristics that carry out in that experience that are to be considered. And in my opinion, what I think neoliberals, to some degree, white America, etc., people who have made it, higher income, are celebrating is we are not as gross as Donald Trump revealed. We don't subscribe to this. This is embarrassing what he's leaked. What he felt like he had the privilege to have, and now we show that we are actually, not. We are respectable with Joe Biden. Character matters, integrity matters. We are not the country that has done all these horrific things that we have privileges over that we cannot process. And in essence, a white fragility component. And I think this, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are people who are celebrating that there's a different flavor, and they're celebrating relief, that kind of acid, foul flavor is no longer carrying the day. So there are people who are celebrating that relief. But many of the people around Joe Biden are just as guilty of domination and suppression as Donald Trump was. There's people who are in that camp that purposely made sure the Democratic candidates in the special election were excluded and suppressed in being the voice of the people. And Joe Biden and his inner circle is just as guilty of that as Donald Trump.
I can see.
Let me ask you about being an independent and being Black.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I heard Al Bartell the whole time I was around the state is, you a Democrat? From Black people. You a Democrat? You a Democrat? Like, that was so important to Black people.
Yeah.
And I wish they could really get beyond party politics. I really wish that we could start as a people to think beyond being a Democrat, as if that is between the Democratic Party and the indoctrination of the church, there's such a stronghold on us as a people.
Right.
How well were you received when you went out and you said, well, I'm an independent? Did you have to explain that? Particularly, I want you to speak to Black people, because I know we struggle with, not being a part of the Democratic Party.
Sure. Well, there's an old cultural saying that talks about, I like you a lot, buddy, but I wouldn't let you marry my daughter. And so it's the same thing. I like you because you're independent, but you ain't a Democrat. And that comes from control. People are comfortable with control and what they're familiar with. Being an independent is going to require something of us that we're not necessarily willing to do economically, politically, and socially. So I understand that it'll take time, but it's unfolding. But you just need to know people are just familiar with what they're familiar with economically, politically, and socially, and they're going to be dyed in the wool about that until we can change the course of action in America.
I'm wondering, Al, if you consider that both the church and the Democratic Party and the Black community have a kind of a protection role that both play, for people who are in either political or economic emergencies, and those are the people who show up. The NAACP, which is heavily intermingled with the Democratic Party, and all three, the NAACP, the churches, and the Black Democratic establishment. They do provide some protection and services and help for people at the same time as what Robbie has emphasized over and over again. They're also exploiters. The upper middle class Black folks are the ones who are joining with white gentrifiers and displacing the Black communities in South Atlanta.
They're very much exploiters. They absolutely are exploiters.
So
lower income, just to specify.
What it seems to me is that we have white working class people who are in a similar position with the Republican Party. Many of them don't necessarily vote, but they are dependent upon the people who are the people who control the Republican Party. They get almost nothing from it. In effect,
that's because they like power, my friend. People like power and access to power, and they do not want to share it, even when there's a benefit of sharing power.
I'm talking about poor working class whites who are under the control of. They don't have power.
In their view, when they have that kind of access, they think they have some kind of power.
I think they have some kind of power. Poor working class white people are not the people being murdered by the police predominantly. Poor working class white youth are not profiled, by state agency and police. That is a power and privilege that should be recognized, because that's how it's hard for us to not align when we don't recognize those components of power.
Yeah. Robbie, the issue once again is that the working class in this country, and we need to have some kind of a clearer definition of who that is. It's not property owners. I don't think that for instance, that Tamara represents small business people. I think she represents the working people
I do represent small business people. I was a small business owner for 10 years. I was a small business owner for 10 years. Personally, I did services for 18 independently. So yeah, I haven't had a quote unquote job since the 90s. So yeah, I do represent small business and small America. Come back to Mr. Bartell. This was about him this morning. We'll come back to y'all later. I know how y'all do go. Come back to Mr. Bartell.
I think we really need to keep in mind that there are common interests as well as conflicts between poor whites and poor people of color, particularly Black people, and particularly in this state. I mean, I was just quoting something.
Again, come back. I'll come back to you, David. Let's go back to Mr. Bartell. Mr. Bartell, tell me what was one of your biggest lessons from this campaign. I know you've run before, and you can tell us those races that you've run before, but what was your biggest takeaway from this particular campaign?
From dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, from dominant Democrats, the amount of affinity and partnership and relatedness this time was stunning. They knew that they could not vote for me, and I knew they could not vote for me. But that did not have them this time withhold their affinity, withhold their partnership, and withhold their encouragement. In the past, they have withheld their affinity and been mean-spirited. In the past, they have withheld their encouragement and their partnership. That did not happen this time. They were encouraging. I got their partnership on many kinds of visits, and I was absolutely stunned by the kind of affinity that I got from everybody.
Yeah, Mr. Bartell, you had 14,640 votes. That's nothing to sneeze at. As an independent candidate, trying to make your way in a field of 21. Like I said, the top candidates right now should be knocking on your door.
Well,
Asking, what can I do to get your support?
Well, the thing that makes that so significant is almost everybody else that was running was either formerly affiliated with the Democratic Party, or formerly affiliated with the Republican Party, or formerly affiliated with the Libertarian Party, except for me. And so those independent votes were real independent votes. I got no invitation to come to a Democratic candidate forum. I got no invitation to come to a Republican candidate forum. I got no invitation to come to a Libertarian candidate forum when everybody else got an invitation from at least one of those. So I was not able to communicate my message to any kind of formally established group. And for me to be able to get those many votes is a footprint now that can be expanded and built on. And I am absolutely stunned and ecstatic about being able to do that as an independent candidate.
I've actually had conversations with some Republicans about, what is it, who really are more independent than they are Republican. I've had conversations with Democrats who are more independent than they are Democratic. So I want to know, and we have Luann on here pretty often on our broadcast, and she's all about being independent right here in the great state of Georgia. And I want us to have these conversations and what that means when you think outside of the box, outside of one party or the other. I'm an independent.
It's the same.
Because I'm very independent in my thinking, Al.
It's the same thing you deal with your commitment to small businesses. The saying goes, grow up, get a good education, and get a good job. It doesn't go grow up, get a good education, and go into business. So it's the same kind of culture. Grow up, be grown, and be a Democrat or a Republican or a Libertarian. So it's the same kind of challenge. And so it works that we change it. We won't be able to change it inside of the political power structure, but we will be able to change it inside of our relationship to culture.
Mr. Bartell, the upcoming runoff for this Senate race that both you and Tamara ran in is in January. And I believe President Trump he's still the president, so I'll say President Trump, is coming to Georgia. There's all kinds of things going on in the country regarding recounts, etc. Looks like Joe Biden's going to be transitioning in. We've had people on this show, our local media in Atlanta, Dominique Huff, who their position, was kind of out of concern with Joe Biden, that communities would go to sleep thinking that the worst is over. And actually, Dominique has a funny saying, he likes his racism overt because it's easier. So in essence, with Trump, it's easier to decipher what Trump is doing because he's silly enough to state it outward, or privileged enough to just put it all out there, instead of kind of this culture of media smoke and mirrors, not really being able to decipher, what's happening behind the scenes, not having the information to know. Given all of this is at play, even including in the Democratic Party, and we now have this major runoff for control of the Senate between Warnock and Loeffler.
Yes.
What do you foresee happening if Loeffler wins or if Warnock wins? And what will not happen if the opposite?
Okay, well, the first thing you want to look at is what caused the turnout and what caused the runoff. You would think that the national media and national stakeholders caused that. It didn't. In Gwinnett County, you had an African-American female win the chairmanship. 2 African-American females won for the first time as county commissioners in Cobb County. The county attorney was won by an African-American female, and so was the county clerk. That's in Cobb County. Over in Gwinnett County, you had an African-American female take over the chairmanship. the county attorney office, the new sheriff in Henry County. So those people turned out because of those candidates. And that's why that election was so high, turned out so high in Gwinnett County, in Cobb County, in Henry County, and other places. Wasn't because of Joe Biden, wasn't because of Donald Trump. Those people's name will not be on the ballot on January 5th. And that's going to cut a hole in the heart of the Democratic turnout. If Kelly Loeffler gets to be elected, it's going to be like turning back the clock and reinstituting plantations in Georgia. If Reverend Warnock gets to be elected, it's going to be a benign representative. He's not talking about Black issues now. He's not talking about reparations now. He's not talking about race and violence now. And he won't talk about it if he gets elected. Same thing with John Ossoff and Senator Perdue. So that's all about political domination and power, and not about empowering the culture of Georgia.
If I could do a mic drop right there, I would, because boom, you said it. You said it. And people are like, running to the. I'm angry because I'm like, Warnock is in the most strategic position right now.
Right.
And he will not talk Black to us
at all.
Has the Warnock campaign not reached out to either one of you?
And he's not going to.
No.
So there's no, well, this is kind of odd then, because Mr. Bartell, you stated that there was an affinity, that you saw something different. I'm assuming that was the Trump effect, but is that basically over now, that the campaign is done, or done? I don't know.
Well, people want change. They're interested in change. They talk about change, but to have them come to grip with doing something they're unfamiliar with, like having rallies in the street to call out Reverend Warnock, they're not going to do that. And so it takes people like Tamara with these kinds of broadcasts. That's why you and David are now heroes and heroettes, because this is what it's going to take, like what we're doing now. It won't come from the 5 o'clock news.
He says unbelievable. And people are saying, so what do we do? Do we vote for Kelly? We already know she's not going to do anything for us, or do we just not vote for Warnock? We don't know what to do. Warnock knows exactly what to do. And the fact that he won't do it is disheartening.
And disturbing.
And disturbing. Very disturbing that he won't talk about reparations. You don't have an agenda for reparations. You don't have an agenda for the repair of Black people when you're standing in the pulpit of Dr. King, standing in the shoes of Dr. King.
Yeah.
And you don't have an agenda for Black people.
Yeah.
This is where I'm so confused, because, and I don't mean to sound naive or purposely dumb or whatever, but this is where I'm very confused. Has anyone driven over to Edgewood, where this church is? It is completely gentrified. It is filled with bars and, liberal, neoliberal, whatever, and there are homeless people everywhere. And it's been happening for over 10 years while, Reverend Warnock has been the pastor of this church. And so I'm baffled what someone like me, who's a Democrat, who's never going to vote Republican, who would vote independent, what am I supposed to do?
You're supposed to do exactly what you're doing now. Robin, you have no idea the impact you have by saying what you just said on this show. I promise you, there are people who are listening to you in places that you can't even imagine. What there is for you to do, keep doing what you do. I know you don't have the data to measure it, but I promise you, my sister, you are already in the history books.
We got to keep speaking truth to power. We got to keep speaking truth to power, and we got to keep calling this stuff out. We can't sit back. We got to keep calling it out.
Some people have asked, how did 21 candidates come up in the Senate race? And I think y'all have because it is unusual. So what happened there?
Well, we all knew that the voice of Georgia was positioned to be heard. We have been picked in Georgia as a global destination. When you see stuff like the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that's a world-class soccer stadium. When you see world-class financial institutions that are now located in Midtown rather than Buckhead, it's clear we're a global destination. So those of us who are running, we know that we don't have the structures in place to combat that yet. Somebody has to take a leadership role and communicate no matter what. So 21 of us said, we don't care. We're clear that the light at the end of the tunnel is not an oncoming train. And we have to let people know that that light is not an oncoming train. And you can't ask somebody to go where you're not willing to go yourself. So you got to stand in the middle of that tracks and confront that light with your voice and do it by demonstration. So 21 people did that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we all had a message, Al. And that's why I thought this was the most phenomenal race, because there was a candidate in this race for everybody. Whatever issue that you stood on and you would fight for, there was a candidate in this race that was standing on that issue. So we all came to the table with I believe most of us, I wouldn't say all, let me not say that. Most of us came to the table with a message.
When Mr. Bartell, when you advise that if Loeffler wins, Kelly Loeffler, who's the Republican running in the Senate race, that Georgia would return to kind of a plantation mentality, et cetera. Can you expand a little on that? And then separately, I'd like to know from both of you, Tamara and Mr. Bartell, what would you do if you were Warnock? What can Warnock do right now to help, to help Atlanta and Georgia?
Yeah. So Attila the Hun conquered and enslaved people in fiefdoms. In North America, we call those plantations. That sister came out and said she was more conservative than Attila the Hun.
That's true. She did.
So she's going to create economic plantations. That's exactly what she's going to do. Well, if I was Reverend Warnock, the first thing I would do is call for the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee to hold hearings and establish a commission on race and violence that will look at, we don't even track data on race and violence. We track data on crime and violence, but we don't even collect data on race and violence. We don't even communicate data on race and violence. We don't even circulate data on race and violence. A commission would do that and establish a public policy conversation for race and violence rather than some reality show that's going to talk about it in somebody's backyard.
And I would jump in and say, Warnock should not ignore Black voters and Black issues and Black concerns. He shouldn't ignore that we are 13% of this population with only 2.6% of this nation's wealth. He shouldn't ignore that white America has 10 times more wealth than Black America. He should be talking about closing the racial wealth gap. He should be talking about reparations, our repair, our redress, standing in the shoes of Dr. King. That's what I expect Raphael to do, and he doesn't. And people are like, what do? We don't do, you can't, and how can you hold him accountable for something he didn't say he's gonna do? When people are like, well, when he get to Washington, he may. Hope. We're just gonna hope he does, we're gonna hope he do the right thing. We're gonna give you our vote and hope you do the right thing. We're gonna write you this blank check. We're gonna give you a blank check. We're gonna sign it and say, here's your blank check, and send you to Washington. We're not gonna get nothing.
How does the Democratic Party benefit from having establishment candidates who are controllable, like Raphael Warnock and or John Ossoff, and backing them to the point that people don't even know of the other 21 like y'all? What is the benefit?
They control the flow of resources. The global investment in the Southeast region of America is stunning. The way you control that is by public policy on finance, by public policy on what projects get funded in economic development, by public policy on what transportation projects get funded. All of those are private sector dollars and public sector dollars. So the public-private partnership is dependent upon who controls the pen of public policy. And that's how they would benefit from their hand-picked candidates.
What would their hand-picked candidates do differently that they would continue reaping the benefits of the three areas that you described, private sector dollars and partnerships,
Well,
that
for
you and
example,
Tamara wouldn't do?
the first thing is the hand-picked candidates are not going to come out on November 4th, which is the day after the election, and says, we were all in this together. There were 21 of us. We should now meet. Hand-picked candidates are not going to do that. Hand-picked candidates are not going to say, here is the thing that Al Bartell and Tamara was championing. I'm going to make it a part of my public policy process. Hand-picked candidates are not going to do that. They're not going to come to Robin and say, Robin, you have been critical of the internal urban process and how it has violated principles that you stand for. Robin, do we have your permission to appoint you to a commission that can bring about cultural change and make it a part of the public policy process? Those hand-picked candidates are not going to do that. They're not going to come to David and say, David, your views on the sacredness of the working class have been violated. We can now turn that around with your partnership. Will you be that partnership? And they damn sure aren't going to come to Tamara and say, we're going to make you the #1 poster person of small business development in Atlanta and in Georgia and the southeast region of the nation. Those hand-picked candidates will have hell freeze over before they do that.
Why does it benefit the Democratic Party to not be inclusive? That's what I hear you saying, that there will be no inclusivity and therefore the data will be deficient and we'll continue to have the status quo inequity and racial inequity that we have, perhaps even worse crime. Why does it benefit the Democratic Party machine for their hand-picked candidates who are controlled to operate non-inclusively?
The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are two prongs of the same stick. We don't live in a democracy, my sister. We live in a republic. And a republic is about ownership, control, and stakeholder management. A republic does not operate on the principles of democracy. So the Democratic Party is not going to operate on the principles of democracy any more than the Republican Party is. It's two prongs of the same stick. So it's not in their nature and not in their interest to share power. It's in their nature and their interest and the Constitution of America to control power, not share it.
David, jump in. You've been real quiet. I know you writing away over there, and Al is going in. Thank you for being our guest today. Brian Slowinski was supposed to join us. He hadn't made it to the broadcast, but we're glad to have you. You okay? Can you keep rocking with us to the top of the hour?
I'm ready to go with the flow.
There it is. I'm going to do my rapid fire with you. Let me do my rapid fire with him, David, and then I'm going to bring you in for your next question. All right, you ready, Al?
I'm ready for it.
One word to describe every candidate, right? Here you go. Doug Collins.
Excluded.
Derek Grayson.
More excluded.
Annette Davis Jackson.
Want to be included.
Wayne Johnson.
Forgotten about.
Kelly Loeffler.
Confused.
Candace Taylor.
Too innocent.
Deborah Jackson.
Uninvited.
Jamesia James.
Invisible.
Tamara Johnson Shealy.
Blatant urban queen.
Matt Lieberman.
Non-existent.
Joy Felicia Slade.
More non-existent.
Ed Tarver.
Wannabe.
Raphael Warnock.
Disgusting.
Richard Dean Winfield.
Long-winded.
Ryan Slowinski,
Forgetful.
Al Bartell,
Grumpy.
Alan Buckley,
More grumpy.
Michael Todd Green,
Uninterested.
Valencia Stovall,
Out of touch.
John Green Fortune,
Uninvolved.
Rod Mack.
Yesterday's hero.
Thank you for that rapid fire. Now this rapid fire, y'all, you want to share any additional thoughts, and I'm gonna let David jump in. Tell us anything you want to say about your rapid fire.
I want to know why Kelly Leffer is confused.
Because
And she was oblivious.
we think that Dorothy of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz is the blueprint for America. And she's confused because she don't know that people have hijacked her life, her campaign, her marriage, her business, and her money. That will make a person real confused if they're walking around like Dorothy and everything else is out of their control 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So in essence, she's being used.
Worse.
Okay.
Hijacked. Being used is a participatory, even if it's not agreed with and reluctant. She's not participating. She's just been hijacked, period.
And why is Reverend Warnock disgusting?
Because he knows he's been hijacked. See, Kelly is confused. She's not clear about how she's been hijacked. She's not clear about how all that worked. Warnock knows how all that worked. And he is disgustingly allowing himself and his legacy to be hijacked. He is knowingly allowing that to happen. That's why it's disgusting.
Do you think that Reverend Warnock in some way believes the ends justify the means, and when he gets to this position, he will then in some capacity, do right?
No, he is a smart person, absolutely brilliant. He knows that functionally the ends does not justify means. He's clear about it. He's also clear about when he gets elected, there's nothing he's going to be able to do except to continue be a poster boy. My concern is how it's going to impact his health. I do not want the health of that brother to deteriorate because of the choices that he has made.
They will destroy him, Robbie. If they will destroy him, if he goes in and not go in the right way, it's political. In politics, I can tell you have to go in this door the right way. Because if you go in any other way and you try to change when you get on the other side of that, they will destroy you.
This was the same criticism that Cornel West had about President Obama.
I was just going to ask you about Obama. Go ahead.
Same thing. Cornel West said, that brother knows better. He's been in the struggle. He's been taught by the right people. And to go in there and be benign, to come out and say something like, it's too big to fail, for him to not stand up and say, this is a civil rights opportunity. This is an opportunity for reparations, for him not to say that. Cornel West said, and he knows better, is a travesty. Same thing about Reverend Warnock.
So how do you
let's give hold that thought. Let's give David some David.
I'm kind of processing all of this, and I'm not really. I'm looking at it from a different framework. I think that the independent base of power has got to be working class, and that's a in and of itself is a real problematic statement, because the working class in this state and in this country has been the white workers have been set against black workers, and as long as the the progressive voices among European Americans, among whites, are not addressing that, we're never going to get out of this dead end.
So let me ask Mr. Bartell, how are you received in the progressive spaces as an independent?
I'm perceived in the progressive spaces as, if you want somebody to champion community, go get that bald guy that's always running his mouth. You can count on him to champion urban, suburban, and rural communities. You can count on him to speak up for people who don't have the resources. You can count on him to make sure the data gets in the right places. You can count on him for that. We cannot give him access to power, but you can count on him to communicate the reference points of the communities in urban, suburban, and rural centers. That's what they say about Al Bartell, the independent.
Robbie, you want to come back to your question?
I guess to the line of thinking that Mr. Bartell was speaking about earlier and referencing Cornel West and his criticism of former President Obama, who assisted greatly with, obviously Joe Biden, and who's assisting with the Senate runoff with Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. He endorsed Raphael Warnock. He's endorsing John Ossoff against, I don't even know who's running against. That being said, how did Obama escape, I guess? Did he just go along with establishment, therefore his health is okay, and he wasn't destroyed because he did behave? Is that it?
Well, there's medical implications, and there's something that we say down in the Deep South called culture. Here's how we say it. Boy, that brother sure did get gray real fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we can sense that his vitality and aliveness took a severe hit.
You're right. I saw him on the interview. His book just came out, A Promised Land, I believe.
Yeah.
He's you can see that he has aged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we know, Robin.
I understand. Why don't you think his wife, who seems to have a genuine love for him, why are they jumping in here and supporting the Democratic Party even now in corporate Joe Biden? And even after having seen all of this, I understand that Trump is obviously horrific. Some people believe that if we go down that, we'll have a kind of an entire reform because it'll expose all the problems that we actually have. But that's not the route they're allowing.
He went to Harvard and she went to Princeton to learn the dialect, the nuances, and the participative reference points of the archetype of power. And they learned it, and they have those practices, and they are connected with it. They're not going to disavow it. They're not going to turn away from it, and they're not going to reject it.
You said a lot right there. And I can tell you, I just graduated from Emory this year, got my master's in law. And I can tell you, I actually said this to somebody. I said, what I know now, I had to go to law school to know what I know now.
Right.
In order to maneuver in these spaces.
Yeah.
There are things that you're taught that you don't even know. I didn't even know I didn't know these things until I realized I didn't know them. So to say that about he and his wife going into these institutions and getting this training, an educated Black person is the right Black person. We're dangerous because once we know how to do this scares white America.
And Black America.
And Black America.
David has interjected a couple times here discussing David, I don't want to put words in your mouth or speak for you and have it incorrect, but the white worker and Black workers are set up against one another. And I believe you're trying to say that unification of, the similarities or bonding on similarities would have a significant effect that would be positive. Do you and Mr. Bartell, do you have thoughts on that? David, if I got that wrong, feel free to reiterate it.
what David is pointing to is if black workers and white workers came together in solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
then the controlling power structure would lose its impotence and have to share power. David is pointing out that the controlling power structure pits white workers and black workers against each other so they can maintain control of the dominant power reference points and not ever have to share them.
Yeah, there's a quote that I just read in an article from LBJ from the 1960s, who says that as long as you can convince uh, the poorest white man that he's better than the best black man, you
Yeah.
can pick his pockets. You know,
Yeah.
you can pick his pockets. And he said, not only that, um, if you can keep somebody, if you could keep him in a position where he thinks he's better than someone else. LBJ was really, spicy in his language. He said, "Hell, he'll take the money out of his pockets for you." You know, and
Yeah.
so I mean, it was much more, spicy and eloquent than I just. But I really think that the whole key to what you were talking about the duopoly, about the maintenance of power, is is to um, is to set white working people against black working people. It's not an even thing. It's not, just we can all get together. It's been going on for 300 years, not 400, but 300. And the social control system that's been in place is to use white workers against their working class interests and in favor of convincing them that being part of the white race actually gets them some good. It doesn't. That's the issue. I mean, look at the mess that white working people are in. And that's one of the reasons why I would love to talk to you more about this issue of what you keep bringing up about the I'm not sure what you called it exactly, but what I would say is the statistical basis, the analysis that tells what's actually happening. And I've been really trying to fight back against this idea that has entered the culture that that white people have 10 times the wealth of African Americans.
Right.
If you break that down and you look at white working class people, they do have a considerable amount more wealth than black working class people, but it's nowhere near 10 times.
No.
And it really seems to me is crucial if we are ever going to address white workers and not have them just be part of the white race.
Does David understand that a black college graduate is in a lower economic status than a white high school dropout?
Well, there again, I mean, there are, yeah, you've got me stumped on that one. But I could say
Yeah.
a lot of other things that I've looked at, a lot of other statistics that I've looked at that show the basis for solidarity, not that there isn't inequality.
We have to center the needs of the black community in this right now, David. Because by 2053, the data shows that Black America will have zero net wealth. We will be a permanent bottom caste in this country. And we're in a place right now where our house is on fire and they're gonna have to send the fire trucks to us first. So we're gonna have to center the needs of the black community here and right now. This special election, like I said, we're at the top of the hour, but this special election, Al Bartell, I just want to say you ran strong, you ran hard, brother. You came with it every opportunity you got. It came across as grumpy to some people, but you bought it. You did the dang on thing. So it was a pleasure to be on the campaign trail with you. We have some other great candidates that are going to join us in the coming weeks. Al Bartell, give us some parting words. Give us some parting words.
Well, I have two parting words. The first is a cultural saying that has arisen and more prevalent now than ever before. We may have come over here to this country on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. So things that burn my soul and my blood and people who do that, I have to reach out to them for all of us to make it. There's a collaborative spirit that we cannot afford to quelch because of our disdain and our hurt of the inequality. So that's the first thing. And then the second one, and even more prevalent in acknowledging Tamara Johnson Shealy, is that I just want to make sure that when I finally grow up, I want to be just like you.
Thank you, Al. You can find Robbie Caban right here on the internet at robbiecaban.com. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. And I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. You can find me at tamarashealy.com. Mr. Bartell, please don't be a stranger. Promise us you're going to come back. Promise us you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to continue to speak truth to power. You are always welcome to this broadcast. Bring it, brother, because I really want more Black people to understand what it means to be independent and independent thinking. So please come back and bring it like you brought it today. Thank you for joining us.
Very well, I shall do that.
Thank you. Have a great week, everybody. Continue to join us. Stay with us. These next few weeks are going to be fire. Watch and see. We're going to bring the heat to this United States Senate race. Have a great week, everybody.
Forever means privilege is never.
Amen.